We're used to seeing actors break bones and risk their lives to make an action movie unforgettable. We applaud the bruises, the stunts, the sweat-soaked performances that bring chaos to the screen. But what happens when the chaos spills behind the scenes, when the very people meant to carry the film forward begin to tear it apart from within? In the world of action cinema, conflict isn't always scripted. Sometimes, the most explosive moments happen off-camera. Quiet, slow-burning, and devastating. An actor storms off set. Another demands the ending be rewritten. One refuses to promote the film. Another shows up and sleepwalks through their performance on purpose. Whether it was out of frustration, regret, ego, or sabotage, these actors didn't just clash with their directors, they threatened to sink the entire project. These weren't background players or unknown names. They were the faces on the poster, the stars you bought a ticket to see. And yet, somewhere between contract and camera, something snapped. The result? Films that stumbled, flopped, or were quietly buried while whispers of sabotage followed like smoke trails from a wreck. Some called it rebellion. Others called it self-sabotage. But the truth is often stranger than fiction. Let's dive into 15 action films where the enemy wasn't a villain on screen, but the lead actor behind it. 1. Firewalker, 1986. Chuck Norris refused to promote his own film because he hated it. Imagine making a movie, watching the trailers hit theaters, the posters go up across cities, and then realizing the star of the film refuses to say a single word about it. That's exactly what happened with Firewalker, a 1986 action adventure that tried and failed to replicate the Indiana Jones formula. Starring Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr., on paper, it should have worked. 2 charismatic leads, desert landscapes, buried treasure, and enough fistfights to satisfy fans of missing in action. But behind the scenes, Norris had doubts from the beginning. According to crew members, the script felt like a parody and not a good one. The tone shifted constantly, the humor felt forced, and the pacing lagged under the weight of a confused identity. Once filming wrapped, Norris reportedly made a quiet but firm decision. He wouldn't promote the film. No talk shows, no interviews, no late-night banter or red carpets. When asked why, his response was unusually blunt for a Hollywood star. It was just a bad film. Firewalker limped into theaters with little fanfare, earning lukewarm reviews and quickly vanishing from box office charts. Critics noticed the lack of star presence. Fans were confused by the film's tone, and insiders knew exactly what had happened. Chuck Norris had killed his own movie silently, strategically, and without throwing a single punch. But Firewalker wasn't the only film derailed by a star's cold shoulder. 2. The Last Match, 1990. When your lead actor walks out mid-production, the script doesn't just change the whole movie, implode. The Last Match was meant to be a gritty, testosterone-fueled tale about a Vietnam vet assembling a ragtag football team to rescue his daughter from a Central American prison. It was absurd. It was loud. It was the kind of VHS-era action concept that could have worked if the lead actor hadn't bailed halfway through filming. Oliver Tobias, a British-German actor with a reputation for intensity and unpredictability, was cast as the protagonist. But once cameras rolled, tension rose quickly. According to accounts from the crew, Tobias clashed with the director over character direction, pacing, and even line delivery. Every scene became a negotiation, and every rewrite sparked another argument. Then came the breaking point. Midway through the shoot, after a particularly heated exchange on set, Tobias simply left. No grand announcement, no official resignation. He vanished, leaving the production in chaos. Producers scrambled to retool the script around existing footage, creating a jarring narrative shift. Entire scenes had to be restructured, and the original arc of the character was abandoned. The final product, barely coherent, was released straight to video, with little marketing, and even less coherence. It's rare to watch a movie and feel the ghost of an actor who isn't there. But in The Last Match, the absence is deafening. Scenes feel hollow, momentum breaks without warning, and every awkward cut whispers the same thing. The star left, and the story fell apart. But walking off set is one thing. What if the actor stays just to fight the director every step of the way? 3. I Come in Peace, 1990. Dolph Lundgren didn't just punch aliens, he clashed with the director, too. By 1990, Dolph Lundgren was already known for his brooding intensity and physical presence on screen. After playing the iconic Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, he pivoted to roles that showcased his muscles and menace, I Come in Peace being one of them. The film, a sci-fi action hybrid, featured Lundgren as a tough cop battling a drug-dealing alien in the neon-drenched streets of Houston. But while the film's premise was wild enough, the behind-the-scenes friction was even more volatile. Lundgren reportedly butted heads constantly with director Craig R. Baxley, a former stuntman who envisioned a gritty, grounded tone. Lundgren had different ideas he wanted: more stylized action, more one-liners, more visual flair. What followed was a tug-of-war overtone. The tension bled into the production. Some action scenes were altered on the spot, others were shot twice, once the way Baxley wanted, and once with Lundgren's modifications. The crew began referring to the film as two movies fighting to be one, but the real sabotage came later. In post-production, Lundgren allegedly lobbied for specific takes to be used, scenes to be shortened, and even parts of the villain's arc to be toned down, shifting the spotlight back on his own character. The final cut feels uneven, lurching between gritty cop drama and absurd sci-fi spectacle. The movie gained cult status years later, thanks to its odd charm and over-the-top violence. But those who were there remember it differently. A set dominated by ego clashes, second-guessing, and a star who wanted to reshape the movie mid-flight. And if you think that's disruptive, wait until the lead actor says he regrets taking the role at all. 4. Killing Streets, 1991. What happens when your star actively distances himself from the film before it's even released? Killing Streets had everything an early 90 seconds action thriller needed: a Middle Eastern hostage plot, political intrigue, and Michael Pare in a double role as twin brothers, one a soldier, the other a civilian. It should have been a bold showcase for Pare, whose career was still coasting off cult favorites like Streets of Fire and Eddie and the Cruisers. Instead, it became the film he couldn't disown fast enough. From the beginning, Pare was reportedly unhappy with the project. The script felt like a generic knockoff of Missing in Action. With political overtones he found shallow and character motivations that shifted without reason. On set, insiders claimed he pushed back on dialogue, suggested rewrites, and even questioned entire scenes, only to be overruled by a production team focused on speed over substance. By the time the film wrapped, Pare had already checked out. He didn't attend any promotional events. He didn't grant interviews. And in a rare moment of candor during a later press appearance for another project, he said flatly, "I wish I'd never taken that role. It was more than regret, it was erasure." Killing Streets came and went with barely a blip. Reviews were scathing, highlighting wooden performances and a nonsensical plot. But beneath the surface, the film carries the weight of an actor's silent rebellion, a performance that never fully commits, a presence that fades even when he's on screen. Sometimes, Sabotage doesn't look like shouting matches or storming off set. Sometimes, it's just a look in the actor's eyes that says, "I don't want to be here." And then there are actors who don't just resent the ending, they try to rewrite it. 5. Death Before Dishonor, 1987. When the lead actor demands a new ending, it's not just creative input, it's control. Death Before Dishonor was marketed as a patriotic, flag-waving military thriller. One man, one mission, and a whole lot of explosions. Starring Fred Dryer, best known at the time for his TV role in Hunter, the film follows a tough-as-nails Marine who defies orders to rescue his men from Middle Eastern captors. But off-camera, Dryer was reportedly less interested in following orders and more focused on reshaping the film in his own image. According to interviews with crew members, Dryer grew increasingly dissatisfied with the third act during production. He believed the original ending where his character dies in a self-sacrificing blaze of glory was too bleak, too final, and too un-American. He lobbied hard for a rewrite, insisting that audiences wanted to see their hero walk away victorious, not in a body bag. The producers resisted, the director pushed back, but Dryer wouldn't budge. Eventually, the ending was rewritten, reshot, and re-edited to let his character survive, complete with a slow-motion walk through rubble, flag waving in the distance. It was the kind of tonal shift that grated against the grittier moments that preceded it, and critics noticed. Some praised Dryer's intensity, but many noted how the film's conclusion felt tacked on and emotionally dishonest. Behind the scenes, it was clear the star had won the battle, but the movie had lost the war. Sometimes, sabotage doesn't mean ruining a film, it just means reshaping it into something it was never meant to be. But what if the sabotage isn't subtle? What if the star refuses to look weak on or off screen? 6. The Glimmer Man, 1996. When your lead actor refuses to appear vulnerable, there's not much room left for drama. In The Glimmer Man, Steven Seagal plays a mystical, Buddhist-leaning ex-assassin turned LAPD detective. Paired with Keenan Ivory Wayans as his reluctant partner, the film aimed to fuse buddy cop banter with deadly martial arts precision. But behind the philosophical one-liners and black trench coat, Segel was fighting a different kind of battle, one with the script itself. According to multiple accounts from the production, Segel objected to several scenes where his character was supposed to show fear, doubt, or even just lose a fight. His stance was simple: his characters should never appear weak. That meant no injuries, no panicked reactions, and absolutely no scenes where another character upstaged him. One infamous example: a knife fight between Seagal and the film's villain was meant to be gritty and suspenseful, with both sides taking damage before a final reversal. But Seagal allegedly refused to film it as written. The sequence was restructured to make him virtually invincible, landing effortless blows while barely being touched. Director John Gray and the stunt team were forced to choreograph around Seagal's demands, stripping tension from key scenes. The result was a film that felt oddly flat, with action sequences lacking stakes and a lead performance that bordered on parody. Seagal's unwillingness to show vulnerability didn't just affect tone, it affected casting, editing, and the morale on set. Wayans later remarked that he felt like a sidekick to a walking tank. It's one thing to act tough. It's another to refuse to ever not be tough. But Seagal wasn't the only star who tightened his grip on a film until it buckled. In the next case, ego didn't just reshape the story, it hijacked the entire production. Sedem, Kobrati Soch, 970. Sylvester Stallone didn't just star in the movie, he rewrote, recut, and ultimately reshaped it into something unrecognizable. After the box office success of Rocky IV and Rambo: First Blood Part 2, Stallone had enough clout in Hollywood to call his own shots, and in Cobra, he called all of them. Based loosely on the novel Fair Game, the film was supposed to be a gritty cop thriller directed by George P. Cosmatos. But from day one, it was Stallone's show. He rewrote large portions of the script to tailor the film around his on-screen persona. Fewer lines, more one-liners, less character development, more body count. Action scenes were extended, while emotional beats were cut down or removed entirely. Entire supporting roles were minimized or edited out altogether. But Stallone's influence didn't stop there. Reports from the editing room suggest he personally oversaw the final cut, demanding changes that altered the film's pacing, tone, and narrative coherence. The result was a 90-minute bullet storm, stylish, violent, and often incoherent. Deleted scenes hint at a deeper film underneath, one with stronger character arcs and a more methodical plot. Critics panned Cobra for being soulless, and even fans of Stallone were split. The film has since become a cult classic for its excesses, but make no mistake, what audiences saw was Stallone's version, not Cosmatos's. In this case, the sabotage wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. A star with unchecked power turned a promising film into a personal vanity project, and the collateral damage was the movie itself. But where Stallone flexed behind the scenes, the next star simply vanished, leaving the crew, the cast, and the entire shoot in limbo. 8. Street Fighter 1994. Jean-Claude Van Damme was the face of the film, but behind the scenes, he nearly derailed the entire production. Street Fighter was Capcom's attempt to bring its beloved video game franchise to the big screen. Backed by a sizable budget and riding the wave of early 90 seconds action mania, the film cast Jean-Claude Van Damme as Colonel Guile, the American hero with a Belgian accent. But while the movie struggled with tone, effects, and adaptation, its biggest challenge was its leading man. Van Damme, at the height of his fame and ego, was reportedly one of the most difficult elements of the production. He frequently showed up late to set or didn't show up at all. His absences were often unexplained, though insiders whispered about off-set partying and drug use. One crew member later described the shoot as a war zone where the colonel never reported for duty. Director Steven E. D'Souza was forced to work around his star's absences, reshuffling shooting schedules and rewriting scenes on the fly. Body doubles were used more often than expected, and dialogue was trimmed to accommodate Van Damme's unpredictability. Cast and crew morale plummeted, and the budget ballooned as delays piled up. Even in the scenes he was present for, Van Damme's energy was inconsistent. At times, he seemed bored. At others, he played scenes with a strange detachment as if he was already done with the project. The final product was chaotic, campy, and only loosely resembled the source material. While Street Fighter eventually found a cult following, few would deny that Van Damme's off-screen antics contributed to its disarray. But Van Damme wasn't finished. In another film, He wouldn't just neglect the project, he'd actively express his contempt for it. 9. Universal Soldier: The Return, 1999. When the lead actor openly hates the sequel before it even hits theaters, you can guess how the audience will react. By the late 90s, Jean-Claude Van Damme was no stranger to erratic career moves. But even by his standards, Universal Soldier: The Return was a misfire. Meant to revive the cult success of the original 1992 film, the sequel brought Van Damme back as Luke Devereaux, a cybernetic soldier trying to rediscover his humanity. The concept was promising. The execution, however, was another story. From the start, Van Damme seemed disconnected from the project. On set, crew members noted that he rarely engaged with the creative team, offered no input on scenes, and often seemed to be just hitting his mark. According to several interviews years later, he reportedly told insiders that the movie felt like a cash grab, a sequel made out of obligation rather than inspiration. He wasn't wrong. The script was rushed, the tone veered wildly between high-octane action and unintended parody. But instead of trying to elevate the material, Van Damme distanced himself from it. He skipped several promotional events, gave terse interviews, and appeared visibly uncomfortable whenever asked about the film in public. Worse still, his performance reflected his disinterest. Gone was the brooding intensity of the first Universal Soldier. In its place was a flat, disengaged version of a character that once felt iconic. Critics pounced, audiences stayed away. The film flopped and quickly vanished from theaters. Sometimes, sabotage comes in the form of silence. No protest, no public meltdown. Just a star who shows up, does the bare minimum, and quietly lets the movie collapse around him. And yet, Van Damme's apathy pales in comparison to what happens when an actor rewrites the rules of an entire genre mid-shoot. 10. Red Scorpion, 1988. When an actor questions the film's morality and the production nearly poisons its own star, you don't need a villain on screen. Red Scorpion was pitched as a hard-edged Cold War action film, Dolph Lundgren as a Soviet agent turned rebel freedom fighter in Africa. It had the explosions, the slow-motion kills, and the propaganda-heavy script that fit right into the era. But behind the iron-jawed lead was an actor increasingly uncomfortable with what he was helping to create. Lundgren, fresh off Rocky IV, took the role expecting a complex political thriller. Instead, he found a chaotic production that lacked both direction and moral compass. The film was shot in Namibia under brutal conditions. Reports from the set detail oppressive heat, poor safety standards, and questionable treatment of local crew members. At one point, Lundgren was allegedly exposed to toxic chemicals used in special effects, requiring medical attention and halting production for days. But beyond the physical strain, Lundgren reportedly took issue with the film's tone. He questioned its simplistic portrayal of good and evil, its glorification of violence, and the real-world political implications of its story. He pushed back on several scenes, requested script changes, and attempted to tone down nationalist messaging, most of which were ignored by producers, determined to keep the America versus everyone else theme intact. By the time Red Scorpion wrapped, Lundgren was disillusioned. He skipped most of the press tour and has since distanced himself from the project. In later interviews, he diplomatically referred to it as a learning experience, Hollywood code for never again. It's one thing to dislike a film, it's another to feel morally compromised by it. And sometimes, the actor's silence speaks louder than any monologue. But the next star didn't stay silent, he checked out completely. Yksitoista. Ballistic. X versus. Sever kaksi tuhatta kaksi. When your lead actor shows up looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, the camera can't hide it. Ballistic. X versus Sever is often cited as one of the worst reviewed action films of all time. A chaotic blend of bullets, slow motion, and baffling plotline. On paper, it had potential. Antonio Banderas and Lucy Liu, two stylish leads, pitted against each other in a high-tech spy showdown. But in execution, the film felt less like a thriller and more like an obligation. For Banderas, that's exactly what it was. Sources close to the production reported that Banderas had signed on to the project based on an earlier draft, one that promised a sleek, character-driven action piece. But as rewrites piled up and direction shifted toward noise over nuance, the actor grew disillusioned. His frustration reportedly showed on set: minimal rehearsal, flat delivery, and an unwillingness to reshoot scenes unless absolutely necessary. In interviews surrounding the release, Banderas spoke in vague, diplomatic tones, praising the cast and crew while sidestepping any discussion of the script. His body language told a different story, tight smiles, short answers, and the look of someone already trying to forget the experience. Critics were merciless. The film was torn apart for its incoherence and lack of emotional engagement. One review noted that Banderas seemed to be sleepwalking through smoke and gunfire. Audiences stayed away. The movie bombed. Years later, Banderas has rarely acknowledged ballistic in retrospectives of his career. And who can blame him? When the lead actor mentally checks out, the audience can feel it no matter how loud the explosions. But some stars don't just mentally leave, they physically vanish, forcing the filmmakers to finish the movie without them. 12. Ticker, 2001. When your star vanishes mid-production and leaves the rest to body doubles and editing tricks, is it still their film? Ticker was a low-budget, direct-to-video action film meant to capitalize on the fading but still recognizable brand of Steven Seagal. Partnered with Tom Sizemore and Dennis Hopper, the film should have been a gritty, fast-paced ride through bomb squads and criminal underworlds. What it became instead was a masterclass in editing around an absent star. According to crew members, Seagal only filmed for a few days despite being billed as the lead. He reportedly arrived on set late, left early, and refused to shoot certain scenes entirely. The production was forced to use stand-ins for wide shots, shoot dialogue scenes with over-the-shoulder angles, and heavily rework the script to reduce his on-screen presence without admitting it. The result is a bizarre Frankenstein of a film. Seagal's character appears and disappears with little explanation, delivers dialogue in obvious ADR, and is often shown from behind or in shadows. At times, it feels like he's starring in a completely different movie, spliced in after the fact. It didn't help that his performance, when he did show up, was lethargic and disinterested. The charisma that once defined his earlier work was gone, replaced by a kind of sleepwalking detachment that even editing couldn't fix. Ticker was panned by critics and ignored by audiences. But for those paying attention, the sabotage was clear. The star had bailed, physically and creatively, long before the credits rolled. And while Seagal's vanishing act was literal, the next case features a star whose rebellion came not during filming but after, in a public display of embarrassment. 13. The Big Hit, 1998. What do you do when your star promotes the movie by calling it stupid? The Big Hit was a flashy, hyper-stylized action comedy that leaned heavily into late 90 seconds aesthetics, neon color grading, slow-motion shootouts, and self-aware absurdity. At its center was Mark Wahlberg, playing a sensitive hitman with self-esteem issues in a world of ruthless killers. It was meant to be his quirky breakout into action comedy territory. He had other ideas. From the beginning, Wahlberg reportedly clashed with the tone of the film. He found the script over the top, the character cartoonish, and the humor too broad. He voiced concerns during production, but the director, Kirk Wong, stayed committed to the movie's offbeat energy. Wahlberg did his job. He showed up, hit his marks, and delivered the lines. But once the film was wrapped, his distaste became public. In press interviews around the film's release, Wahlberg didn't hold back. He openly called the movie stupid and admitted he only took the role for the paycheck. He mocked his character's emotional monologues and even joked that he hoped no one would actually go see it. The backlash was immediate. Columbia Pictures reportedly scrambled to control the damage, re-editing trailers and shifting promotional focus to co-stars like Lou Diamond Phillips. But the harm was done. Audiences, sensing the dissonance, stayed away. The Big Hit floundered at the box office and received mixed reviews, some critics liking the eccentricity, others echoing Wahlberg's disdain. There's honesty, and then there's sabotage. Wahlberg didn't need to sabotage the Big Hit during filming. He waited until the spotlight was brightest and burned the bridge in real time. But our next star did something subtler. He accepted the role and then refused to support the film once it hit screens. 14. Romeo Musti, 2000. What happens when your lead quietly distances himself from the finished film, even as it finds box office success? Romeo Must Die was supposed to be Jet Li's explosive Hollywood breakthrough, a modern martial arts take on Romeo and Juliet, blending wire-fu action with hip-hop culture. It paired Li with the late Aaliyah in a flashy, fast-paced East meets West production that caught the attention of young audiences and studios alike. But for Jet Li, the experience was far more complicated. While he delivered the required action, his fight choreography remained sharp, fluid, and inventive. Li reportedly expressed discomfort with the film's tone and the romantic subplot. He had concerns about how his character was portrayed, and more critically, how the American production system treated martial arts choreography as style over substance. Insiders noted that Li had little creative input, a stark contrast to his previous Hong Kong roles, where he often collaborated deeply on story and staging. Post-production made things worse. Several of his fight scenes were re-edited with digital effects and unnecessary slow motion, diluting the impact of his raw skill. When the film was released, it performed well. But Lee's presence on the press tour was minimal. He gave a handful of interviews, most of them subdued, and notably skipped many US-based promotional events. In later years, he rarely referenced Romeo Must Die when discussing his career milestones, an omission that fans began to notice. To the studio, it was a surprise. To those close to Lee, it wasn't. Sometimes Sabotage isn't about blowing things up. It's about walking away from something you never felt part of in the first place. And in our final case, the lead didn't just try to forget the film he fought for control, rewrote the rules, and took the power back. 15. Shadow Warriors, 1997. When ego and control clash with budget and logic, the movie becomes collateral damage. Shadow Warriors, also known as Assault on Devil's Island, was a made-for-TV action flick that reunited Hulk Hogan with his wrestling fanbase in a military-style rescue mission. It was supposed to be cheesy, explosive, and fun. Instead, it became a tense power struggle between the producers and a star who wanted to run the entire show. Hulk Hogan wasn't just the face of the project, he wanted to control every frame. According to crew accounts, he frequently overrode the director, questioned the pacing of action scenes, and even tried to rewrite portions of the script to elevate his character's dominance. His reasoning? This was his brand, and his fans expected him to look invincible. But what works in the wrestling ring doesn't always translate to film. Production suffered. Directors were replaced mid-shoot. Stunt teams clashed with Hogan's entourage over safety and realism. Scenes were restructured to remove any suggestion of vulnerability, turning Hogan's character into a cartoonish one-man army immune to bullets, explosions, and basic logic. The final product aired on TV with little fanfare. Critics didn't bother. Viewers tuned in expecting campy action and got something closer to a bloated ego trip. Even co-stars later remarked how difficult the shoot had been, hinting at the star's need to dominate not just the screen, but the entire creative process. It wasn't an actor sabotaging a film out of spite or regret. It was a slow, relentless erosion of collaboration, until all that was left was a star-shaped crater. And yet, as strange as these stories are, one remains that didn't even make the official list because it might just be the weirdest of all. Bonus: Deadly Heroes, 1993. This one didn't make the top 15, but it might just be the strangest of all. In Deadly Heroes, Michael Pare stars as an elite Navy operative tasked with rescuing a kidnapped American official from a Caribbean terrorist group. On the surface, it's a paint-by-numbers action movie, stock villains, tropical explosions, and plenty of slow-motion gunfire. But behind the camera, things were unraveling fast. Pare, who had previously made headlines for distancing himself from killing streets, was reportedly even more detached this time. According to crew reports, he showed up late, left early, and expressed open disdain for the project, calling the script trash and the production amateur hour. But rather than leave or push for changes, he chose a different form of sabotage: passive withdrawal. He delivered lines without inflection. He ignored stage direction. At one point, he allegedly refused to perform a key fight scene, forcing the production to use a stunt double in wide shots and heavy shadows. His attitude infected the set crew. Morale plummeted, co-stars disengaged, and the director resorted to splicing together usable takes just to finish a scene. The final cut is riddled with inconsistencies. Pare's presence flickers in and out like a ghost, sometimes fully there, sometimes replaced by an obvious stand-in. Dialogue is dubbed. Reactions don't match actions. It feels less like a movie and more like a salvage operation. It never made it to theaters. It barely made it to video shelves. But Deadly Heroes stands as a curious footnote in action, film history, a movie starring a man who, by all appearances, didn't want to be there at all. Some actors sabotage a movie with ego, others do it with silence. And sometimes, all it takes is a single decision: a line refused, a scene skipped, a press tour abandoned. But what drives them? Regret? Pride? Control? We've seen stars derail films from within, reshape stories to fit their own image, or vanish before the final shot. Now it's your turn. Do you think these actors were fighting for integrity or just killing their own movies? Tell us which story surprised you most, and which one you think never got the ending it deserved.